Hi everyone, this is Dr. Mary Bach reporting for J310 Fabulous. I'm going to talk to you now about sources and verification. I'd like you to think today about the difference between always being a healthy skeptic and not being a cynic. So let's start by thinking about where stories come from. If you work in a newsroom, many stories start at news releases or phone calls or as ideas you have while you're driving to work. Often, one story generates another story simply because you never get all your questions answered. Sometimes a story starts out with the simplest of questions, like, what the heck is that? Which is what must have been going on in people's minds when they saw this meteor across the sky in Russia. Okay, that's a simple question, what the heck? But as journalists, our lives are all about questions, and they're the seeds that create stories. Why is traffic so bad on your way to work? What part of town will benefit from the new budget? Who is behind the bill that was just introduced in the legislature? Was it a state senator or a lobbyist with a binder full of photocopied proposals from other states? Think about story creation as a sort of spiral. You start by thinking about what a news story generally is, something that impacts your community, something that is happening that people care about. We all know the basic elements of news and what makes things interesting. The second step is locating and gaining access to the elements. A journalist has to know who can answer the questions and where you're going to find some of the answers. Then you'll go out and record some of those answers, whether you're writing them down in your notepad or collecting interviews with a video camera. You get back to the newsroom or news van, and you have to take those facts and narrativize them. That is, put them into a story that makes sense for other people. The audience reads or watches that story and sometimes gives you feedback. Based on that response, you know what kinds of questions to ask next, and the stories simply go around constantly in this self-informing cycle. So you're working on a story and you have some questions. To use our example of why traffic is so bad, who are you going to call? Well, think of all the different places you could go to find out. Most likely the people who take care of the highway will have some ideas. They might not have all the answers. So the police department or sheriff's department or cities surrounding that road might also have some information. Who uses the road? They might know what's going on just as well. They're the ones who know just how long it takes them to get to work or get home. So for the experts from the road, think about people like truck drivers who know exactly what it's like on I-35 all the way from Texas to Iowa. The best news stories include people like the truck drivers and those people who are closest to the situation. Of course, experts are also helpful for putting things into context. How do you find those experts? Well, the University of Texas actually has a directory just for journalists, and most universities do. Service organizations and charities can help you find people who are in need, as well as the experts who serve them. Cross directories, the printed kind or online, are like phone books. They allow you to find people based on address instead of phone number or name. So if there's a fire in a particular part of town, you can call people who live nearby. The more you report, the larger your database of contacts will grow. When you finish one interview, always ask who could help you some more. Network. Build what used to be called a great Rolodex. Now it's just a big file on your smartphone. Take advantage of the variety of sources available to you. There are elected leaders and other people who are in charge. There are also public relations representatives who work with you and help you build a story. There's experts. There are official records. There are copies of things like the bill that might be before the legislature or data from a special report that explains all of the nuts and bolts of a proposal. Reference material might also be something that's found in a library and that helps you through the database or just contains some information about an event. Newsrooms also have a little library or bookshelf with these kinds of useful references. But do not underestimate how much ordinary people can tell you about their situation and how much they can help you craft a narrative that is compelling and interesting for your audience. After all, they are your audience as well. Social media are very helpful in getting news tips, finding sources, and developing a network while you're looking for sources. However, you also want to make sure that you also are aware of your public profile when you're using social media like Facebook or Twitter. Maintain your good reputation. And also, Don't just use social media to get good information. Be sure to give it to the people in your network as well. We've all heard about the times when social media were used in breaking news events and spread errors so quickly it was hard to contain them. Breaking news is the time to take a moment to breathe. As hard as it is, in a way it's almost counterintuitive, but breaking news requires us all to be especially careful before we pass on information without verification. So when you see a tweet that's interesting, you want to make sure who your source is and that it's not a prankster. Try calling them or call their office. Rarely is a tweet alone news. Even when an eyewitness reported on the sounds of helicopters whizzing by his home in Pakistan, journalists in the United States needed verification from their sources at the Pentagon to confirm that Osama bin Laden had been killed. Stories are better when they include a variety of the types of sources. The top-level sources might be the police chief talking about a situation in a neighborhood, but talking to the actual officers on the beat will also add an important perspective. And finally, talking to the people who live in the neighborhood is essential. They live there and they're the face of the issue. Think about making sure your source network reflects your community. Make sure you do not always talk to the same type of person. Make sure that over time your stories reflect the voices of Black, white, Hispanic, and Asian people, men and women, older and younger people, and people who represent all income levels. Not only is this socially responsible, but it will make your stories more vibrant and interesting. Crowdsourcing is a technique for getting help with your stories. To get back to the traffic on interstate problem, how in the world would you find a truck driver to interview unless you have one in the family? Well, one way might be to go to Facebook and see if anybody in your network knows anybody. Who knows anybody who drives a semi on I-35? Major stories can also benefit from other people's smartphone and video and photos. And finally, some newspapers have actually used crowdsourcing as a way to get involved in community issues, for instance, how to repair or replace a local bridge. Now that we've talked a bit about finding sources, how do you know whether that person is trustworthy? Well, this is where the healthy skepticism comes in handy. Think about how this person might know what they claim to know. Did they witness an event? Are they involved in the committee that is putting together this legislation? Do you know this person? Have you worked with them in the past, and have they proven to be reliable? Always consider that someone might have a hidden agenda. As a journalist, you're a popular target for people who want to push for a particular point of view. Find out what your leaders own, where they live, what their interests are. The motives of powerful people are not always easily seen. You have to know how people might benefit from a decision when you assess what they say about it. Think about ways to verify the claims of your sources through documents or records. Or can they take you to the scene? Can you witness it yourself? There's no need to be cynical, but there's every reason to always wonder where your sources are coming from. Think about their possible conflicts of interest. And of course, this goes for information on the web. We can be easily seduced by the way information is presented or published on the web. A website might have statistics or things that look like citations, but until you verify the source of that website, it's important to be careful. So know your websites. Know your .gov from your .com and how to find public records on the web. Know the difference between a blogger with an agenda and a primary database. Social media can be a great source if you're trying to find out more about a person in the wake of breaking news. Act quickly after major crimes because pages on Facebook are often taken down. Take screen grabs and hold on to them while you verify the facts. Tweets can also be a great news source, and you can quote them. But again, make sure you know whom you're quoting. Some of the questions to ask about a website. Know the right place to go. Know the site that's most likely to have the original information. For instance, if you're interested in the demographics of Texas, you're better off going to a government records site than a blogger's column. Always consider source credibility. If you find a website that looks like it has some very good scientific information about the benefits of a diet supplement, but you notice that it's selling that supplement, that should be a red flag. How current is the information on the website? Who wrote it, and what was their motivation? Motive is frequently a good way to determine whether or not you and your audience should trust the information. Then ask, how do you know about that? Does anybody else know? Are there databases or documents that you can use to verify this information? Try to put the information into context. If one source tells you one thing and another has conflicting information, keep digging until you can resolve the conflict. Learn how to use search engines besides Google. Google is a really good search engine, but there are other databases that are not available on the World Wide Web. So learn how to use your university's databases and your local government databases for the various reports that can help you get information quickly. Go for the good stuff. Avoid second-level sources that water down the data and interpret it. Library databases can be helpful. So are the websites of polling organizations like Harris or Gallup. Companies and institutions and social service agencies often issue things called white papers, original research, that can help you. Avoid using press releases as anything more than a tip for a good story. Press releases represent the interests of the writer and not necessarily your audience. Avoid using websites instead of real people. Avoid reusing quotes from other publications. Do your own research. Go for the eyewitnesses, not second-hand information. Avoid grandstanding by people in power, and avoid being used for someone else's interests. Cultivating your source network. This means not only keeping in touch with powerful people, but with the people who help those powerful newsmakers. In fact, support staff often have been in the office longer than the elected officials, so do not ignore everyday people who work in your courthouse or city hall. Stay in touch with your sources. Don't just call in times of crisis. Periodic visits, face-to-face, can help you develop a working relationship. And of course, emphasize the working relationship. You don't want to get too close. Sometimes you might have to tell a story that they don't like, because your first obligation is always to your audience.